Jessica Baum is a psychotherapist. She is the founder of the Relationship Institute. Her newest book is Anxiously Attached, Becoming More Secure in Life and Love. Welcome to the show, Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, excited to have you on. Tell us a little about your personal lives, more about your work, and why you do what you do.
Well, I'm a psychotherapist and I have a group practice and I have a coaching business. And I started in the world of addiction and codependency and then worked my way into becoming an imago therapist, which is a specialized couples counseling, and started seeing patterns. And in my own life, of course, I think, anybody who goes into this field has also personally struggled. So just really learning about relationship dynamics and attachment theory, which led me to my book, Anxiously Attached. Struggling with codependency my whole life, and in my personal life, and then treating it in my practice, really learning how to heal it and seeing what works, and then diving into attachment theory, which really is at the root of all of it, led me to want to write this book for myself, the book I needed, and the book that I'm sure so many other people have already told me they needed. So that's how I got there. It's a very short version of how I got there.
I appreciate that. Human beings have been meeting each other and forming relationships and having babies for a really, 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 really long time. Was it always hard, or did we move along into modern living and hit some kind of an inflection point where it just got extra hard?
It's a good question. I feel like it's getting harder because people's attachment systems are getting a little bit more insecure, and that has to do with evolution and technology and the transactional nature of our world and how we kind of don't understand the nature of relationships quite the same. And there's almost too many options and too easy to like discard. And, it's a lot going on. It's a harder world. And I also think people don't understand how hard relationships, how much work they entail. So there's a lot of our culture just wants instant gratification and wants now. So after the initial honeymoon phase, many people, you know, they don't stick it out to do the deeper work.
So it's a lot.
It is a lot. Yeah, relationships are their work. They really are. It takes a lot of work, and it takes a certain type, you have to be willing to look at yourself and kind of look inward and understand what is really yours.
What is really yours? Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so in the book I talk about your attachment wounds and your protectors and your adaptive strategies and how we stay in connection. And I go into like why we behave certain ways in relationships, why we attract certain types in relationships, how those dynamics play out, and starting to get conscious of how fear and adaptive strategies are actually running the show versus, because we're all trying to stay in connection. So starting to understand, okay, this is really mine, like my abandonment or my fear or what's going on for me. So instead of trying to control you, we start to shift the narrative and try to heal that or try to be with that differently so that we don't, end up in relationships that are just based on control and fear.
So I am working to manage my fear and my adaptive strategies rather than control myself. Did I get that right or wrong?
Working to understand and have compassion for my adaptive strategies and the way I operate when I'm scared. And once I understand that and get to the root of the fear or the wound, we could heal it. And then there's more space or neuroplasticity that gets built, and we might have more options in terms of how reactive we get in relationships. We might have more awareness. We call it dual awareness into understanding like, oh, this is what's really going on versus you're doing this to me. We might get out of projection easier. We might have more compassion for our partner and how they're actually adapting and trying to survive and start to see them through another lens.
Where do I pick all this stuff up from? Do we all get it around the same time, just throughout life? My wounds, my protectors, my adaptive strategies.
Throughout life, but a good portion of how our nervous system is hardwired comes from our primary caregivers and our home. And so as babies, we don't come out fully developed. And so we're still kind of connected to our mother as a one unit, and we are still forming our nervous system. And depending on her nervous system, and we're connecting right brain to right brain, we will form a sense of safety in terms of how responsive she is and how much she's co-regulating. And so we develop either an inherent sense of trust, or anxious people, they tend to feel like the ball's going to drop, or they leave themselves and monitor the room, although codependent traits or avoidant people kind of learn that they're not going to get their needs met, so they shut down. So we learn a lot of this very, very early before we even have what you would think of as memory. The memory is more sensational, and the trust, the inherent trust that we're going to get our needs met is really a bodily sensation that we either have or we don't have. And then when we're adults, we take that memory and those early adaptive strategies and experiences, and actually we reattach, and we bring all of that with us. And then that gets played out very differently. And, people don't want to hear it, but a lot of that is really rooted in fear or patterns that were embedded very, very early on.
What do you mean people don't want to hear it?
Because people would want to hear that, like, oh, it's not really my partner that's causing me to have this, feeling in my gut or this explosive feeling. And it's like, actually, that's a feeling you've had before. That's your body saying, this is very scary. That's a sign that there's earlier trauma there. And that's a very big connection to make when you can start to make the connection that big sensations actually are a form of memory. They're our earliest form of memory. And we feel the biggest sensations usually when we attach the deepest to another human being.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And I guess that is it a function of I would rather blame it on exterior outside circumstances than recognize or explore the idea that this is something that is unique to me and maybe it's not my fault, but if I want to get to where I want to go, it needs to be addressed.
Well, I think there's a couple ways to answer that. It's not all from the past. There's the split. There's, 80% happening in the past that's old, and then 20% usually happening in the here and now, depending on the sensations going on. And I think some people are more conscious or willing to get more or bring more awareness to what's really going on and take in this information and expand that window of like, wow, there is many layers to this, or the wound is showing up in all my relationships. The sensation seems to be always there. And then there's a lot of people that are just stuck in projection who can't get out of the fact that it's the other person's fault because they don't have the inner abilities yet to kind of form a deeper understanding of what's going on inside of them. So they tend to try to control or manipulate or understand what's going on inside of them in direct relationship to what's going on outside of them versus, hey, there might be something else going on here. We might need to look at this differently.
Again, going back to the reality that we're all a lot. We've all got our past that what we have and maybe we struggle with, maybe we don't, and there's the things that we want today and the things that we need today. I know that I can certainly get myself so twisted up that I almost feel like I'm sort of lost or blind, and I try to outthink it. What role does intuition have for just my kind of gut instinct, if any?
It's interesting because a lot of people, intuition is big, but if you have trauma, you can think that you're having intuition and it's really a familiar trauma that's leading the way. So it can
Hmm.
be very tricky as to what is intuition, what feels right, what feels familiar. And then sometimes even you can have the intuition all you want, but the allure or the red flags are there, and I can explain that, and you still kind of go diving in head first. So intuition isn't always accurate because trauma and the past can kind of influence the decisions that you're making in the present, and you might not be conscious of that.
Right. So my what I perceive to be my true north is maybe has been knocked off by some kind of a trauma or core wound of some kind.
It can be, and I believe as human beings, and I do study interpersonal neurobiology, and this is proven that we're inherently designed to heal and go towards healing. So even if we pick an unhealing relationship or an there's a part of our body that wants to recreate to hopefully get conscious or hopefully become aware. That's the goal. I mean, I can say that I had to get conscious in the most painful situations. And sometimes it's through the suffering or through, different situations that we feel are right. Our intuition guides us, and they're not necessarily wrong if they help us evolve and shift and change. And I've been lucky enough to have that experience, but when you're in that experience, you don't feel very lucky.
No, no, it doesn't sound like it would be a good feeling
No.
or that you would feel very fortunate
Right.
to be having it.
Not until
I feel very
after.
lucky about this right now.
Not until after. There's like a little bit of gratitude afterwards because it's shifted you. But yeah, during you feel like you've opened up Pandora's box.
Right, right. My question was, are we ever fixed? But I understand that that's crude and blunt. Perhaps you know what I'm trying to ask.
We're never needing to be fixed. We're always whole and everything
Okay.
we do makes sense, right? So are we ever fixed? No, but I think we become more and more conscious and we become better at attending to what is coming up in our inner world and our outer world. And we develop more and more capacity to treat ourselves with that tenderness and love and others. So our compassion and our bandwidth expands, and we evolve, but we're always being touched and we're always being awakened and we're always being, if you want to call it, triggered. But the intensity might change, or the reaction might change, or the viewpoint or the way we look at it or the way we respond eventually shifts. So it becomes, I wouldn't say it becomes easier. It does become easier unless something drastic happens, right? Like life is full of wonderful surprises and sometimes really hard surprises. So yeah, it gets easier, yes, and it gets deeper and more meaningful, and we don't try to escape our own suffering quite as much, and we become more resilient and we become more insightful as to how to handle things when they come up.
The title of the book is Anxiously Attached, Becoming More Secure in Life and Love. Is that what you hope for people as they engage in your work, is to not to get fixed like I just described or said, and you did a great job of describing it, but to then just feel more secure that I can handle this situation. I'm secure in my thought process. I'm secure in my interpersonal relationship with my loved ones, people I care about.
Yeah, and it's such a good question. Like, I want people to feel more secure in themselves, but I also want people to understand that everything they're experience makes sense, and to make sense of their experience from a more compassionate way, from the neuroscience, from the way they develop. Because I think once we can start to understand we are the way we are, we shift in general, and that there's nothing really wrong with us. This is how we adapted to survive. And so I want people to understand that all their parts are okay, all their adaptive strategies make sense. And as you start to heal and your capacity to be with the uncomfortability and and to attract support or healthy love, your ability to feel more secure expands, because you start to experience connection in a new way, and you start to feel more secure in your connections, and you start to pick different people to stay connected to, people who are more loving and present and nurturing and kind, versus maybe what you would call like as a trauma bond, or something that's familiar that recreates the wound, and you're not really in a healing process with it.
So how do I know if I think that we all need to do this kind of work, but how do I know if I need to maybe more than somebody else?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. I think if you know that you need to do this work, you're just very lucky because you're already being called to do something a little bit deeper. But if you have struggled in the same type of pattern over and over again, and you have these deeper feelings of not feeling lovable or abandonment wounds, and you just feel like, you know what, I want to figure this out. I want to heal a little bit deeper. It's not that they don't show up. It's that really a lot of space, and things shift around them, and you're able to make healthier choices. So if you're just sick and tired, I know for me, I was just sick and tired of being miserable, And I was like, I got to work through it. And working through it means you feel really uncomfortable in the presence of people who can really hold it and help you navigate those waters. And I was just like, I'm not going to live the rest of my life so miserable. And so I just made the choice that I was going to heal it. And it's it's a journey, but I mean, what's the other option? To stay unconscious and hang in there? I mean, people who do that are just surviving, and there's nothing wrong with that either. But just be aware you're just surviving, and when the right people, places, and things show up, maybe you will be courageous enough to try to go there as well.
So there's more for you potentially.
Yeah, and I want to say it never ends. It's not like I'm sitting here and saying, I've done the work, I'm done. No, it's a continuous unfolding. Does get easier. I'm going to say that, but it is a continuous unfolding once you become a little more embodied. Yeah.
I dislike the saying or the term or whatever it is, leveling up. And there are different levels to things. So you experience when I feel like when I recognized some of the causes of my negative patternings, like scarcity, I traced it back to when I was a little kid and lots of the things that were going on in my household with my parents, relationship that ended up splitting up and not having enough money. And I think that these are probably pretty common, that very few of us experience perfect childhoods or growing up. And so I can speak to the value of doing the work that you're describing a little bit, um, just kind of scratching the surface. But when you do, you feel more in control, you feel more secure. So I certainly am a proponent for the things that you've been describing.
That's great. And the irony is, like, in my experience, doing the work or starting to do the work, it's all about letting go of control and letting others help you. And then the paradox is you feel so much freer, you know?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. Letting go of control, Jessica.
It's literally like I've been spending the last couple of years of my life, just keep surrendering it, you know? It's
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. I like to joke that I'm not a human being. I am without question a human doing, and I'm
Oh
trying
boy.
really hard to become a human being because I heard that that's what you're
Okay.
supposed to do, Jessica.
Yeah, and the human doing is really born out of survival. Like, I must do to feel safe. If I'm not doing, then, I'm not feeling as safe. So that's okay. That's where it's good that you know that. And I was a human, freaking the biggest producer and human productive machine, and it was actually slowing down. It was very hard for me. It was so hard. One of the hardest things I've ever done.
Those patterns that you've been talking about, Jessica.
Yeah, yeah, those patterns, delegating, trusting others, having space in your life to deal with what floats up, all that stuff is really hard. And I think you're one of many who are like, real. I just remember clearing my schedule and being like in and facing every single thing that I thought I would never have to face again. And I get it. I get why we stay busy. It makes perfect sense. And yeah.
It does, doesn't it?
Yes.
But you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to get what you always got. Isn't that how it goes? Or maybe on the first
Yeah.
day of physics, we learned that an object in motion will stay in motion unless I acted upon by an outside force and vice versa.
Yeah, and I always like to look at it as a protector. Like when I was a workaholic and, people would still say I'm busy, but I was really, really busy. I used to say I needed work. I needed that safe place. I wasn't ready to deal with every single thing that was going on inside of me. So work provided safety for me. And until I had safe enough people and a safe enough environment and all the right things, I thank God I was that busy because I just couldn't have coped. And whether it's shopping or eating or drinking, like we all have ways in which we protect ourselves that we kind of need, that it's not about really taking them away. It's about becoming aware of, like, this is why I'm working because I don't want to slow down, because if I slow down I'm scared, starting to become more conscious of, like, oh, this is why I'm doing this is why this behavior is there, and that's okay. That is really okay.
I love it. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people learn more about you? How can they engage with you? And where can they get their copy of Anxiously Attached, Becoming More Secure in Life and Love?
I'm all over the internet, but if you put Jessica Bauman, anxiously attached, anywhere on Amazon, I'm in like 11 countries. I have a coaching business that's beselfful.com, and I have a private practice here in South Florida, the Relationship Institute of Palm Beach. I have a group of wonderful like clinicians that work for me and are trained with me, and we are all, versed in healing attachment wounds and codependency. So yeah, just Google me online. Luckily, I pop up everywhere, and the book is a wonderful, I'm not just saying, like, it's a wonderful place to start. There's so much value, and I put so much in that book. So a lot of people get a lot of healing experiences from that book. And if you read that book and it's working, doesn't have to be me. You can just find a therapist, find someone, bring what comes up in the book to another human being, because you do really need to heal in healing relationships, which is another whole topic. But thank you so much for having me on today.
Well, it was a pleasure. If you enjoyed this much as I did, show Jessica your appreciation and share today's show with a friend who also appreciates good ideas. Get your copy of Anxiously Attached, Becoming More Secure in Life and Love. And I will link that in the notes of the show. Go to beselfful.com and check out the Relationship Institute of Palm Beach as well. I will link all of those in the notes. And um, dig in. This is a good starting point. And like Jessica said, hopefully you'll be able to find some good tools and just get started in this process. Thanks again, Jessica.
Thank you so much.
Until next time, remember, do your part by doing your best.